Hello, everybody. This is Zach's Edit again. I'm your host, Zach Cooley, and I'm honored to be here with Aaron Jones. He is the lead singer of a very exciting independent folk rock band called the American Pirates. They have their debut album out now called What a Friend, and I've just listened to it. And boy, it is terrific. It absolutely blew me away. So I'm honored to have you on the podcast today, Aaron. Thank you so much for being here.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So I particularly wanted to talk to you because everybody is so very multi-talented on this
Yes.
on this record. There's not any one thing that anybody does. Everybody can do everything. But I was especially moved, sir, by your voice in particular. And I know when you do a lot of different things, it probably is a bit frustrating when somebody says, "Oh, I love the sound of your voice." But coming from somebody who always wanted to be able to sing, but could never carry a tune in a bucket, to hear somebody that naturally has the ability to sing, like my wife is a very terrific singer. To hear somebody that sings naturally, I'm automatically moved by that, and I was particularly moved by the versatility of your voice, not only as a singing voice, but in your way of telling a story. So, can you tell me about where your natural talents began? You were obviously
Yeah. Well,
born
I'd
with
have
this
to
stuff.
go back to my parents. And it's nice. I accept that compliment. It's not something I was expecting to hear, but I appreciate that. I do feel self-conscious about my voice sometimes, but obviously I'm the lead singer, and it is such a blessing that the confidence that this team of players brought to me, where I honestly didn't really think about my voice much in the 4 main days of recording, which is pretty remarkable because I was worried about it going into it. But when we got there, we were so busy and excited by what we were hearing that I don't think I did too many takes except on one song, and it just flowed pretty naturally. And I just got to honor my parents who live in Springfield, Missouri, Donna Jones and Stephen Jones, originally from Vincennes, Indiana, or Monroe City, Indiana. But I was born in Missouri. They knew probably from the time I was a toddler that I was going to be some sort of musician. And there was always a playful nature and singing around the piano from my mother. So I really got to just thank my mom for passing on the creativity and a playful, creative spirit. Always making up songs, and I don't even probably remember a time when I didn't make up songs because my mom made up songs. So I think the credit goes to my parents.
And I'm a very big fan. I'm an old rock and roll guy, really, but I'm a very big fan of anything that includes a horn section,
Yeah.
any kind of jazz. And what I love about this album is that it covers the entire American music development throughout the 20th century. Start all the way in vaudeville and go all the way into the 90s, and you hear a little bit of everything in that record. And I'm just gonna go over some of the things I heard. It may not be pertinent. It may not be what you were trying to
No, I'm
reach.
fascinated to hear what you.
The song "Conflict" was interspersed throughout the entire album, and not to mention the artwork of the album put me in mind of the progressive rock bands of the 70s, which my favorite band of all time is Genesis. So it put me in mind of that, that part of it. And then, of course, there's vaudeville jazz and some of the a cappella form of Amazing Grace, which was done to the tune of Conflict, had me in mind of even Gregorian chant way back when, And then, in where we live in Witt County and Bland County, everything you hear is bluegrass, bluegrass, bluegrass. And that is well earned in its place, that there's a reason why it's here, but so many people don't want to branch beyond that. So they have this little country store off the highway that has its own version of Big Rock Candy Mountain, and it is so, repetitive that sometimes you want to be in the back room with a butter knife. You know what I'm saying? But you took Big Rock Candy Mountain and made it not only palatable but enjoyable with the early jazz sounds, and to be able to do that, and to take something like Sweet Fern, because the Carter family is from our area too, so we get Carter family out the wazoo. The way that you presented Sweet Fern was just, again, very versatile. It was not, monotone as the Carter family can sometimes be. Again, this is strictly opinion. I'm not trying to upset anybody here. But the way you presented it, it was much more modern. Loved your accordion playing on it, by the way. And even, with a sense of humor, the way you presented that song. And then, of course, love Bye Bye Blackbird, the old spiritual, which I thought you did a fantastic job on. And Mac the Knife, the Bobby Darin version of Mac the Knife, is one of my very favorites. It's a terrific standard, but it was based on is it a French opera? If I get that wrong, Albert's going to smack me.
I believe it's German originally. So we were playing around with the original German lyrics.
It was German.
And I just remember, probably in music history class, maybe we heard a little snippet, and I was like, wow, the original is so much more sparse and, frankly, scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to capture some of that, but also, I think that there's multi-levels of influence. We're trying to honor the fact that the song mentions names of people, and that actually came later, where they're like, Lottie Lania is one of the singers. And she was thrown in there, I think, with the Louis Armstrong version, and that's far later than the original. So we were being very playful, as we are with Sweet Fern, as we are with almost everything. Sometimes it's hard to know when we're serious and when we're playful, and maybe we're a little bit of both. So I don't know how that humor comes across, and I do feel like we took some risks, like doing that, and I just hope people kind of embrace that kind of playful, creative spirit when they hear it. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well, I certainly picked up on it. Again, I don't know if I picked up on it in the right places, because I tend to have, a pretty a warped sense of humor myself, if you will, and a relatively wide expansion of musical taste. I heard everything. These are just some names of some people that I heard as I was listening to some of this. Um, Al Jolson.
Yes, yeah, you nailed that. That is, I studied the Al Jolson recording of "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime,"
Yep.
and didn't try to do a, what do you call it? Not a parody or
You're
not trying to do that, but I definitely listened to it a lot, and even down to that funny little flute part that's doing a militaristic kind of da 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 da. We playfully did that purposefully badly on the recorder, which I was a lot of fun to add in. So there are little winks and nods to the past.
Well, I've
That,
heard "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime" sung in a ballad form that just makes me sob. And most recently, I heard it a few days after my father passed away, which
I'm sorry to hear that.
did not have the most uplifting effect on me. So when I looked at the track list and saw "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime," I thought, oh, this is not going to be fun. But it's got a stirring horn section, and it has your vocals are very gritty and playful and very Al Jolson like on that record, as it is on the very I think the most haunting track on the album was "Little Orphan Annie," which I thought was the story of hers, was not one, even though the Broadway show, when they're singing Hard Knock Life, they're kicking up their heels as they're mopping the floors, and that's not the real story. And
no.
And you captured.
Yeah, I've got a story for you about that.
Please share. Absolutely.
Why I take it a little bit seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll just say one thing is I do believe that we should recover within reason some of the scariness of the old fairy tales and the old songs.
Right.
One thing I say is fairy tales are horror stories for the family. Right. And they shouldn't scar us, but they do make us kind of cuddle in together. Whoever's scared can kind of like embrace and hide at the scary parts, but it helpfully helps us deal with crisis and terror in our normal everyday lives. Well, just a little story on Little Orphan Annie. In my family, my grandmother, who passed when I was in high school, she was for a short time in an orphanage during the Great Depression. It's amazing that nobody was there to take her in, but there was a fire and somebody died. I don't remember who died, but her and her twin brother were placed in an orphanage for a few months. And she remembers being terrified of that poem. And I hope there weren't worse things that happened, but it was really scary to her that the ladies, what she remembered as the mean ladies at the orphanage, would scare the children. It was all girls. Well, no, I guess her brother was there too, but maybe the girls and the boys were separated. But they would threaten them with that poem, like, you be good or we're going to read this poem to you. And so that was something that she was terrified of growing up. And when she got out of the orphanage, she would never allow that poem to be in her home, or she wouldn't allow her children to hear it because it really scared her. Now, I just had heard that story somehow. And then years later at the church I go to, a family knew I was creative at writing songs, and they had brought me Tiger, which we haven't recorded yet. Hopefully the next album we'll do more William Blake. I have a setting of Tiger. They had brought, one of their little girls had brought me this poem, Little Orphan Annie, and had asked me to set it to music. And I didn't know what to do with it, and many months later it just suddenly hit me what it should be over those chords. Some of the chords came to me first, And then, by the way, those same chords are on Reverse Rag number 3. The same chords, just different rhythm for those two songs, which is a thing. It kind of exposes a thing I do. I will often rework something and turn it into something that hopefully sounds quite different, and you might not even realize they're the same structure or the same chords. So that's a descending bass line, which is a classic Renaissance and Baroque thing. And Hit the Road Jack, is the same bum, 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 bum.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this just goes bum, 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 and it doesn't really finish very well. Bum, bum, and it comes back. So it's a kind of Hit the Road Jack kind of chords. And so anyway, that's a little bit of the story. So there'd been a haunting story of my grandmother hating that poem because it scared her. So that made me kind of take it seriously, that in older times when you didn't have movies, poetry and songs were kind of like the horror stories that, Edgar Allan Poe or whatever. So I tried to do it with a little bit of that. I don't know if it's vaudeville. I don't know what it is. A little bit of over-the-top theatrical pathos. And hey, I really got to credit the recording engineer and the sound studio, which brought this all to life. You actually want the audience not to notice the recording process, but amazingly, and this is another story, I don't know if we have enough time to get into this, but people came forward and recorded us with very little cost. I would have never been able to make this album with this team if people wouldn't have said, hey, we're going to do this for essentially free because you can't afford this. I didn't know we were going to be in a professional recording studio, and then another person came forward and pretty much offered to pay for it. This is the person that we're thinking, John Mandarin. That's his pseudonym. I don't know how to say that. He's a kind of an anonymous figure in my life that stepped forward to pay for this, which, we could have never done this. We would have just been, playing around Bloomington, and no one would ever get to hear this outside on this level. So I actually like the fact that nobody's talking about the recording, and that's because I think it's so good that we don't even worry about the recording. And because before this, my recordings are not very good. So really got a shout out to Andy Bierge and Max Riggle, who I'm basically calling the producers, because they were right along with us, subtly using vocal effects to bring out the theater just enough, I hope, where it doesn't get too pantomime-y, but really just bring you into the story.
Well, and, if I had the money, I would definitely invest in you guys, too, because I have not been a fan of mainstream music in the last 30 years. And
I agree.
And when you look at the stuff that has come out in the last 30 years and people that are awarded Grammys by the Recording Academy, and I hear this album and I'm thinking these guys should be walking away with everything that any kind of music awards should have to offer.
Well, that's a huge praise, Zach. I just want to hand that to the team of the musicians and Andy Bierge and Max Riggle for recording us, because they're the ones that brought us to light. And hey, if your listeners will go out and listen to it, and if they agree and share it, what it's going to take for the world to hear this is people like you talking about it. Otherwise, it's not going to get outside of our little town in Bloomington, Indiana. And then, of course, it's cool because we are all from different places, and we hope that other critics, other bloggers, if you write, I would appreciate negative or positive reviews. For us, any news is good news. You've probably heard that, Zach.
Right. I mean, I heard everything like Conflict 2 had country tinges to it. It had blues tinges to it. Consequence, I heard everything from Coldplay to Bruce to Bruce Hornsby. And what was great about your records too is if you don't really like bluegrass music, you guys can take one of those songs and turn it into something that everybody can like, because there's really not a genre that you don't cover. I'm a rock and roll guy. My favorite guys are Genesis, who's very progressive rock. You definitely hear that in there. I love blues and soul and jazz, and you definitely hear that in there. Albert is definitely a classical guy, and you've got Renaissance and Baroque and Bach and everything thrown in there.
Yeah, you sure do. Yeah.
And you know, um, and your lyrics to "Sweet Joy," the song you wrote. I mean, that covers all the feelings that everybody has that we might not even want to come out and say, but
Yeah.
you're covering it all but we all have them, and you're covering it all in "Sweet Joy" and making that, highlighting the beautiful parts of life in a very uplifting tune.
Yeah. Let me kind of tell you a little story about Sweet Joy.
Tell me all the stories you want, man.
Yeah, so Sweet Joy, again, that song, I got to be honest, is probably 15 to 18 years old, but it's still developing. It's very improvisatory when I do it. But what it came from, I was just out of college, fell in love with a little booklet of William Blake's poetry. And that's in the also "Little Lamb" is a vocal piece that Albert interprets almost like a jazz standard, which, let me tell you, is a huge honor to have a pianist of Albert's level interpret your song. It just blew me away, and what an honor from Albert. But you can actually look up "Little Lamb" if you search on Spotify or YouTube, "Little Lamb Good Shepherd Band." You'll hear the version with me singing with a children's choir where you hear the actual lyrics. Well, in that same collection of poetry by William Blake, there's a poem called "Infant Joy," and I just took "Sweet Joy, Sweet Joy, and I was just 2 days old," is how that poem, I think it starts. And I remember I had a job working in a Sheraton hotel restaurant. Really kind of not the nicest place, doing room service. You never know what you're going to see going up doing room service. If you've never done that job, you may not want to do that or know. But there was just something about that I hope I captured a little bit of the spirit of William Blake in just the innocence and beauty of beginning of life, and then even the struggles of the annoyance of having to mop the floor. I say something about everything goes crazy as you start to scrub the floor. Okay, we got to get out of here. I got to clean the floor. I got 3 room service orders, and I'm supposed to leave in 30 minutes. How do they expect me to do all this? So some of it was just that, taking that frustration, but realizing that, hey, we're lucky to be alive, like literally. So we could be, I think at that time, the Iraq War was still going on, and when people would complain, I would say, hey, you could be at the Sheraton in Baghdad. Now, that would be interesting if you're a journalist, but there could be bombs falling, and of course that's timely right now. There are bombs falling all over the world here in different places. But something about that spirit in the face of turmoil and heartache, finding joy, which of course is something I'm very thankful that I found in a church I found. But wherever you are in your life, if you don't find that, you're just not going to make it. So I hope I was able to kind of encourage people to face their fears. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely, and to face them with positivity. And
there's also fears when you're recording a song or performing it and you don't know what's going to come out of your mouth next. And that's a spirit that amazingly this band lets me do. Within reason. Like, there's a lot of our live performances, and maybe even on the album, on a song like "Sweet Joy," it is pretty much improvised. There's a kind of a guideline, but to me, listening to the old recordings of early blues, you get that feeling of on the edge of your seat. You don't know what's about to happen.